This is the eLearning Podcast, episode number 17.
I'm not delighted that the pandemic happened, of course. This is horrible. But putting that kind of a challenge in front of this team right at the start and not letting us, kind of coast through that transition, I think has actually been good for the team.
Welcome to the eLearning Podcast from lmspulse.com. My name is Stephen Laddick, and I'm the director at LMS Pulse. My guest for today's episode is Phill Miller. He's the managing director at OpenLMS, one of the world's largest providers of open source learning technologies. With its genesis in the fusion of several LMS providers, the evolution of OpenLMS continued earlier this year when it was acquired by Learning Technologies Group in the UK. Now, with this year's additional acquisition of eCreators in Australia, OpenLMS has consolidated a major role in the open source or e-learning industry, boasting the largest SaaS or cloud-based Moodle operation in the world. Throughout this rapid growth, OpenLMS has managed to place their customers front and center and help advance the global conversation on open source technologies and education. And having gracefully surfed wave after wave after wave of mergers, team alignments, and workplace culture shakeups, Phill is a tenured thought leader that we want to keep tabs on if you're wondering where LMS and the e-learning industry are heading. In this sort of lemonade on the porch type chat, Phill and I talk about what's in store for school administrators, teachers, parents, and students in the craziest back-to-school experiment ever. We also talk about the importance and value of using educational principles to ease customers' minds amid constant change. We talk about how generosity and anticipation can be a foolproof way to ensure business continuity at scale and possibly stave off some of the consequences from the increasing tech gap that's happening in the world. And finally, we talk about the importance of stories in education, customer care, and particularly to consolidate a culture of learning and reflection in what are unprecedented times. And I also encourage you to check out Phil's keynote at the eLearning Success Summit that's titled The Future of Supporting Educators with EdTech. But before we get started, a quick word from our sponsors.
The eLearning Podcast is sponsored by the eLearning Success Summit. Learn from more than 40 experts how to teach, work, and learn online without being overwhelmed. Get your free ticket to the summit at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And lmspulse.com, your best source for news, information, and resources for e-learning professionals for more than 10 years. Get our free roundup of the week's top news at lmspulse.com.
Tell me about what's happening with OpenLMS.
Well, it's been obviously an interesting 4 months. One thing that I will share that very few people probably get to experience or have to experience is that, doing something like we did where you separate a company from Blackboard, from any other company, in this case Blackboard, is so much different than acquiring an entire company. It's complicated, right? You have to separate budgets, you have to separate payroll, you have to and so the last 4 months, I would say that the team has done remarkably well in the midst of just a lot of change, right? I mean, and then of course we had no idea that we were going to separate from Blackboard. I think we actually announced this 4 days before lockdowns really started.
Yeah, before a complete lockdown. You're like, hey, let's extract an extraordinary complicated piece of a very large organization out right in the middle of a global pandemic that shuts everybody down.
No, and in a global pandemic where, our business was, felt the opposite effects of most other businesses. And, our lead volume went up by 400%. Our AWS bill went up by 400%. All of those things essentially overnight. And so it's been remarkable, and you would never plan it that way, but I'm so delighted that it actually happened that way. I need to be careful here. I'm not delighted that the pandemic happened, of course. This is horrible. But that putting that kind of a challenge in front of this team right at the start and not letting us, kind of coast through that transition, I think has actually been good for the team. I mean, the morale of the team is high because we're solving really big and important problems. I mean, we're about to go into, what we call, I'm sure a lot of companies, the back to school period in North America, where a lot of our K-12 and higher ed clients are really ramping up over the next 3 or 4 weeks. And we, our support team and our services team does a lot of extra work in that time. and this is going to be the weirdest, craziest back to school ever, right? I mean, I'm a father of 4, and every day I wonder like what the plan is for school that day. Like my kids are, the triplets are actually in a Montessori daycare type thing, and my son is, I think in the course of the last 3 weeks, the plans for my son's first day of first grade changed like 7 times in a few weeks. And so we always do a lot of planning and predictive modeling about how many support tickets are going to come in and how do we, and we've done all that, but like, we're also just kind of like, we're going to do it, right? Like we're part of this big global experiment in online learning that's never happened before. And I'm delighted to be a part of it.
Yeah. One of the things, it just triggered in my head was it's almost like you didn't inherit, that's not the right word, but it's almost like you're now leading a startup that wasn't a startup just because of, like maybe it's like, because the e-learning world has the inverse outcome.
I say that all the time. We are effectively a startup that has 700 clients, right? Like it's actually it's really cool because you're not, and we also have a wonderful parent company and learning technologies group. Like startups often have to think about how do I make the next payroll and how do I don't have to worry about any of those things, but I do have to worry about building a team that wasn't a team before, and talking to clients who are wondering what these changes mean for them. And then again, to do that in the middle of this pandemic where people are trying to figure this stuff out, I think it's remarkable. I mean, nobody will ever have this experience again. I hope to God that nobody ever has it.
I hope not. Yeah.
But it's been remarkable to watch the team react. But yeah, we're a startup with, we're hiring about 13 people right now. We're a startup with 65 to 75 employees and 700 customers because we're creating this new thing. And it's been remarkable. Just specifics about what's been happening. I mean, our clients have been using the software at extremely high levels and for longer than we thought. Normally we see, schools wind, down at the end of May, beginning of June in North America and different parts of the world differently. And all of those timelines have been extended because people, kept doing work and doing exams after those types of things. We've done several nationwide deals where groups of universities or government agencies have come to us and said, we have this test or this group of final exams that are normally done face-to-face and we don't know how to do it. Can you help us? Mm-hmm. And we've had the extreme pleasure of being able to do that. And actually some of the biggest deals that we've done ever as OpenLMS or even before that Moodle rooms have happened in the last few months as people have been dealing with, how do I manage this stuff at scale? So it's been pretty crazy. Every day you wake up and you're just like, what happened overnight? Like we're a very global company, right? We have 14 people in Australia. When we hire these folks, we'll have about 35 in Bogota. And so there's always when I wake up in the morning, what is going to be sitting in my inbox from Australia, or we're doing a bunch of work in the Philippines right now, and in Hong Kong and Singapore. And you're just like, you wake up in the morning, you're like, what does today bring? And you hope that what you thought your day was going to look like is still consistent. Then of course, like you're experiencing, I'm experiencing, then you're also trying to figure out how to be a first grade teacher.
Oh yeah.
While also running a startup that has 70 some employees. So it's, I think it's going to be interesting to see as people look back on this time, because we're all kind of experiencing it together and we each have our own story in the middle of that. I think we're all going to look back at this and it's just going to be one of these weird times that we all reflect on differently. And I don't yet know what my reflection of this particular period is going to be, not just because of the pandemic, because, several major life things all happen to coincide at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I know that one of ours is just going to be riding around Bangkok on a scooter, when they not only locked down, but they had a curfew, and you're riding around Bangkok at like 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night and there's no one. The piece is completely empty. The streets are empty, and you're like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like no one, you're never going to experience this again. At least not in my lifetime, we hope. Right.
Well, I hope you weren't breaking the law, but yeah, I think.
No, not at all. Not at all. I was going home so I wouldn't break the laws.
I mean, it is And I've been thinking a lot about, how my kids are experiencing this. And I know that you probably have been too, because there are so many things like, my son today, we live in Indianapolis, and he's like, he's a big sports fan, and he was so excited when the NBA restarted in their bubble, and he's a big Pacers fan, and we've been watching some of their games. And then he put on his Colts shirt today, the American football team, and he's like, so when don't the Colts start at my birthday? Which is his birthday's later this month, and I'm like, he's like, will that still happen with Corona? And I'm just like, I don't know, but he's experiencing this whole thing where there's the normal rhythms of a child's life have just been completely displaced for the last few months. And it'll be interesting to see how people remember that and how they reflect on that.
Do you think is one of the things, I'd like to dive deeper there, because you and I both have younger kids, right? So my eldest is 12. I got 12, 9, and 6.
Okay.
And for the 6-year-old and the 9-year-old, I'm like, meh, okay, a year where we're gonna support them. They're gonna be learning. There's play, there's, it's kindergarten, it's first, second, third grade, and I don't want to diminish the importance of those at all. But at the same time, I'm like, look, the human race is going on for a pretty long time where, those are years where they can bounce back pretty easily. My 12-year-old, he struggled, but we supported him, and that's middle school. Middle school is a struggle for everybody. Where does this hiccup become a real is it the high school senior? Is it the higher education? Is it, higher education right now is, as we all know, is having basically a midlife crisis or an existential crisis about the whole college experience and stuff. I'll put that on the table. You tell me.
I don't see that as the biggest problem of this situation is, what age does this matter? I think my biggest fear of this is that it's going to further create the divide between the haves and the have-nots, because my wife is a assistant librarian. She likes to help out at my son's school, and so she's actually just started going back to work. And while I'm hoping, I'm knowing you well enough to know that you're making sure that your kids do their virtual work and do that. I would guess that a very, very large portion of the population that don't have parents that are able to provide that level of support are not getting that. And so, your kids and my kids might have gotten, maybe they only got 50% of the education they would have normally got. I don't know. I'm making that up. There's probably a whole segment of the population in almost all countries that didn't get any education for the last year and may still not be getting an education even as schools start to come back. And so my biggest concern is, has this just, we've gone further as parents. We do virtual Spanish lessons for our children. Learning a second language is an important thing for us. A lot of parents don't have the capacity to do that. So so my biggest concern is not that a certain age level is going to lose something, although I do feel especially bad for seniors who are graduating or people that had sports ambitions and there are different levels where maybe it feels a little bit worse, but on the actual education level, it's not who got the worst cut of it. It's those that didn't get anything at all. That feels like the biggest problem that we're all going to be dealing with for a long time here.
So now let me ask you the hard question. Is there anything that OpenLMS can do or has a way to, or is this, ultimately it's your clients that have to do that outreach, but are there any pieces of your business where you can start to narrow that gap?
OpenLMS is a piece of software, right? It can only do things when people interact with it. And there are people that use it to send emails and reminders to parents, and you can set up parent accounts and all that type of stuff, but all of those are still dependent on a person doing a thing. And that's where, the limit. And again, I think I said this to you the last time, an LMS has never taught anybody anything, right? At the end of the day, it depends on people doing things that drive learning. And so, we want to offer those tools to help. And, we had a series of webinars, actually just last week, we had over 1,200 participants in webinars in the Philippines because a mandate came out that all these schools had to have their fully online program ready. And we have lots of clients. They're not a ton, but we just offered free webinars. We're like, we can help you by knowing how to set up online courses. You don't have to use our software. But in the end, people still have to do stuff, right? Like a person has to go and do a thing to create a piece of content or to contact somebody. And so, it's hard. We want to be supportive of that, but in the end, what we can do is, I think, make teachers and people more effective, save them time so they can focus on narrowing those gaps. We can never replace that.
So what do you think, does this, right now, the conversations I'm having with people, both in just sort of my personal life and here on the podcast and whatnot, how does this continue to roll out? Does it feel like school districts and businesses and whatnot are starting to get a grip and accepting a new normal that they're going forward with? Is that still very much up in the air? How are you positioning OpenLMS at this stage to be a part of that or take a lead there?
So listen, I have no predictions about how long this lasts and when vaccines will be ready and will they work. And I'm not smart enough to know that thing. And I hope everybody's doing all of the right things, and I want to support them in any way I can. There are lots of industries that are going to be affected forever for this. I do have a sense that if a vaccine comes out and cases go down and it's safe, that most people want to return to something that looks kind of like their previous life, right? Like so at some point when people feel it's safe, when their vaccine is ready, whatever, I do have a feeling that people want to get back. I do think there is value, both educational and social value, in education happening in a place, right? Like there's, my educational experience at Ball State University and at law school at Indiana and an MBA school at Indiana, like I did some of those things online, especially in the later years when that became more of an option. But some of the education that I got was the interactions with those people, the physical experience. And so I don't want to lose that. And I don't think anybody wants to lose that. But there's no doubt that our industry has been affected by people actually having to go try online learning and realizing that they can do that. And it's possible, you can, and it's different. You have to think about it differently. So there's no doubt that this industry is going to be changed. School buildings are not going to go away, I don't think, unless this continues for many years, which I pray to God it doesn't.
Those are fighting words right there, my friend.
I don't know. I have my child, like I have a 6-year-old and then the 4-year-olds. I hope that someday they want to go and have an experience that looks something like going to a university or a college to get the social and educational experience that comes along with that. They may not. It may just be online, but I don't know what that's going to look like in 12 or 13 years when that happens. But so I think I have this sense that some version of in-person education matters, but there's no doubt that online learning is going to become significantly more important. I think we're incredibly well positioned for that. We're based on Moodle, which is highly flexible, very configurable. It allows people to experiment and try new things. And I think there's a lot of experimentation and things that are happening right now that I think are going to matter a lot. And so I think we're gonna learn more about online learning in the next 6 months than we have in the last 6 years. And that's not because really smart people haven't been trying to learn those things. It's because the scale of what's going to happen right now is going to be so fundamentally different. And so I'm excited about that. I'm sure there are, but I hope there are great researchers and other people who are collecting data and doing investigations onto how this is happening in transition. And I can't wait to read and hear what that's about, and then adapt our business plan accordingly.
Is there any, you said that, you've done some of the biggest deals for OpenLMS here in the last couple of months. Are there any huge ahas like that, kind of just coming out what you're just saying there, where it's like, oh, wow, this experiment really worked, bringing all of these teachers online really quickly, or all these things, we realize that we can just cut out this whole section of something, or maybe it's like, wow, this one tweak really worked out. Is there anything that's happened like that you can think of?
Well, I mean, I think there are. I'm not going to be the best person to answer that. Some of the people that are closer to those things, I will say that the thing that has become fully apparent, I think, both to us and to everybody else, is that really understanding the scalability of your solution matters a lot. I mean, we've done what I believe are the biggest performance tests of things like the Moodle quiz engine that have ever happened, because we're doing countrywide exams for entire countries or groups of 20 plus universities in a country. And we want to make sure that that works. And people haven't thought that that was ever necessary before. Right. And it wasn't. And so that has definitely been a big key, is just understanding how that works. I think the biggest hurdle in my book is just training faculty that haven't taught online how to actually be effective in teaching online. And I think the experiment or thing that everybody is figuring out is, how do I get all these people that are used to teaching face-to-face to teach online, and how to do it effectively? And there are other things, again, going back to the equity, there was just a study, I can send it to you after this, that showed that something like 46% of Americans in the United States do not actually have broadband. They say they have, broadband, but if you look at their bandwidth rates, it's still pretty low. And I still think there's huge equity issues. I mean, in the K-12, district where my son goes, how to get Chromebooks out to 700 students at my son's school in a way that's safe and effective and that doesn't break the budget, those are very real challenges. So I can't pick up anything other than just doing things at scale, and then making sure that your faculty members and your teachers actually know how to use the software effectively. Those are hard challenges, and people are trying a bunch of different stuff to make that work.
Would that be a key investment for OpenLMS maybe for the next 6 months to a year? Is just the education, the onboarding, I'm really want to ask that as a question. It's like, where are you guys investing? Where are you looking? But it sounds like that could be a great place to say, look, we know we scale, we know the software works, we know we've got a great tool for you. Now let's show you how to do it.
It can be, and it will be. And I'll say that's something as well that generally I don't want to make people have to pay for, right? Like, right. I mean, if they want us to, eventually when this is normal, like come on site and provide training, and then we need to pay for plane tickets and stuff. But in general, I want people to have all the access to software, to tools to help them use that they can. And I want that to be free, or as close to free as we can make it. Yeah, I think it will be an investment area for us. I mean, you and I talked the last time. I mean, we have, I guess, a vision or an idea that, we are going to go acquire other Moodle companies and bring them together. And I'll say that is an area where the fragmentation of the Moodle community has not served it well, because there are all these Moodle companies out there that are building training courses, and they're all probably pretty good, but we've created the same, Moodle 101 course 75 times instead of creating the world's best Moodle 101 course and delivering it once a million times, right? So I think there are some things that we can do there that will provide real benefits to our clients, to the community. But yeah, it's clearly an area. But at the end of the day, I mean, we can create content, we can create opportunities, but a lot of these institutions just have to, bring their instructors together and teach them how to use this stuff, and we want to help them with that.
What about third parties? Plugin creators, the content, the instructional design community, et cetera, et cetera. Like, how are you reaching out to that ecosystem?
Yeah. So when will this podcast air, I guess is what I should ask. And
I can do it next week, or I can do it 8 weeks from now. Your call.
Okay. So can we operate under the assumption that you won't publish this before next Wednesday?
Absolutely.
And then under a handshake NDA?
Absolutely.
Yeah, plugin providers, I'll just share. We think that this fall, most of our clients are going to be experimenting with online tools, and the one that's going to become a real problem for them is going to be proctoring. I think a lot of institutions are going to want to do proctoring, and they're not going to have budget for it. And so next week we're going to announce a partnership where we're going to be offering proctoring tied into Moodle.
Wow.
100% free for the rest of the year.
Holy smokes.
It's very exciting. And when we're delighted to be able to do it, and we think, again, we don't we're not going to make any money off of it. And neither is our partner that we're doing that with. We just think that institutions are going to want to experiment, and they're not going to have the budget to do it. And we want to just take that burden off their plate for them. And so, yeah, we're trying to do things with some of our plugin providers, with some content providers, to make it easier. We'll figure out how to monetize that and make money off of it at some point in the future. That's not what we're worried about right now. We just want people to be successful with those things. So yeah, I think that with the plugin providers, we're changing our model a little bit. We're trying to be much more open to plugins. We still want to review them and make sure they're not going to break things. And so we still perform a lot of QA on them, but we've brought the prices for vendors that want to integrate with our stuff down by more than 50%, because we want to be an engine, and we want to be flexible, and we want to allow that type of capability. So yeah, I think there's some very interesting stuff happening on the plugin side, and we're gonna I think make some disruptive announcements about that over the next couple of weeks. So it's pretty.
So
cool.
let me ask: would plagiarism be one of them as well?
We have not on the plagiarism side. We have a partnership with Blackboard to include Safe Assign, and of course Turnitin works with our stuff and everybody, but we're not making I don't have any specific plans to make, but maybe I should, now that you bring it up. I'll
I was just thinking, another person that I interviewed on the eLearning Success Summit was a guy named Eric Gibbs. He works for Erkind, and I was really fascinated with, they're making their push into the North American market in a big way. They own the rest of the world already. It was just really fascinating to me how complete the solution is, but also just how it's been really well thought out. And that's got to be something that especially higher education is thinking about right now, the turning in of papers and, research documents and whatnot. So who knows? Maybe that's
we like those guys. They have a good integration with Moodle as well. And yeah, so it is definitely an interesting area. And Blackboard Safe Assign has been a good product for many of our clients as well. So I think there's really good stuff happening there. Again, what I love about Moodle is just the experimentation that it creates. And
right.
We absolutely, nobody has the e-learning thing completely figured out. And I want millions of people to try millions or billions of different things. And, through a process that looks maybe somewhat like natural selection, or hopefully a little bit more organized and thoughtful than that. Yeah. Not quite so messy. Hopefully you end up just getting better and better at it.
So let me propose the reverse on that, is that, again, one of the things I've been hearing a lot on the podcast, as well as in the universe that LMS Pulse operates in, is, are you providing any sort of big button like, hey, look, you're a school, you don't really know what you're doing, you don't want to run experiments, you just want something that works? Like, is there just like, hey, click this, it installs, and here's our standard package and it works?
Yeah, that's what we're doing with the proctoring solution that we'll announce next week. Where it will be actually our chat bot will help you configure it. It will get it up and running. It will train you on it. So,
whoa, nice. Yeah,
so we're because we think that is one where specifically there's just going to be a lot of questions and I try to put myself in an instructor's shoes, right? And if you're an instructor that's been teaching biology for 20 years, and you know how to use Moodle, you of course I know how to use Moodle. I upload my PowerPoints there after class, twice a week, and I put the grades in the grade book, and I gave an online quiz one time, last year. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. That's the old model. And now what you've been told is you're teaching your course online. All your exams have to be online. You need to host virtual office hours. Like the flood of things that you're being asked to do is just hard. And then somebody said, hey, you have to do your final exam online. And you're like, I've never done that before. How do I normally the kids, they come into class, and I was going to use the word blue book, and I know that those are still used, but most people don't know what that is.
I'm old enough to know what a blue book is.
Yeah, I'm worried. And again, because you have a global audience, a lot of people aren't going to know what a blue book is. But they're used to saying, hey, students come and sign in for the test, how do I make sure that that's right? And so the idea of just saying, hey, if you just click this button, if you want, proctoring and video, to be on, just click this button and it'll just work. Like that's what we're going to have to do. And again, I'm not sure that proctoring is the right solution to solve assessment, because I'm not sure that summative informative quizzes are always the right way to do that. And, but it's what we have right now, and we're gonna make that as easy as possible. And then if we find things that are better or different, we'll go explore those as well. And I want to, I do want to make some of that experimentation as easy as possible for them, and that's part of what we're going to do with the proctoring stuff next week.
Final question for you, and I haven't asked anybody else this question, but I feel like you might have a really intense answer to this. What are you gonna? What do you want to say to the students? Right. So we talked a lot about instructors. We talked a lot about the administrative side of this and that. Students have not only an interesting opportunity, but a responsibility, and they're a part of this, right? And so, is there anything that you, OpenLMS, or that you've had conversations around that co-learning, that co-creating, that co-building, that anything like that? And I know it's a total curveball, but it just occurred to me.
No, I like it though. So, I mean, there's part of me that wants to answer that on the behalf of OpenLMS, and part of me that wants to answer that as a parent.
Sure. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Maybe we'll do both. So a couple thoughts come to mind, right? The first, just as a parent, but also as an educational technologist, is like, be patient with us, right? Like, I mean, I can only imagine the experience that a lot of students are having where they already have an online presence. They are complete digital natives, and this transition probably feels as seamless as it could for anybody. And they're probably impatient and like, why does my online course not look amazing? Why, I can make a video on my iPhone of a dance party with my friends in 5 minutes. That's better. That's better than this supposedly professional video done by, a PhD in whatever. Like, so just be patient and be thoughtful. And then I would also say, give us feedback, right? I mean, I think this is the scaled global experiment in e-learning, and we're not going to get it right. And we're crazy to think that we are. So tell us where we're not doing it right. And again, I hope that the people that are doing those experiments, the people that are trying things out, are open to that feedback and are agile to be able to change. So tell us that. I think that's what we need, because again, we're going to have an opportunity to iterate here. I mean, in a perfect crazy world, right? What I'm thinking about is not this next semester obviously is front of mind, and every day we have meetings about, are we ready for this semester? Mm-hmm. I also have this idea though, that what's really interesting is the semester after the vaccine comes out, or after the world is safe again. Like, are we just going to put a Band-Aid, or I guess not a Band-Aid at this point, like a tourniquet on it, or are we going to actually go in and solve some of these things and fix them for the long term, such that, the semester after we're safe again looks fundamentally different than it did the semester before this happened? And I think that's a much more important question. And we can't do that if we don't get feedback on how it goes. And then on the student side, I think that's where it is. I would love to get feedback. I do love to get feedback from students on OpenLMS, and is it easy to use? So again, so much of that is governed by how people actually implement the software. I mean, as you know very well, Moodle can be the easiest thing in the world to use, or it can be incredibly complex. Sure. And I don't know. So I want to hear what those students have to say, and I want them to tell us, what they're thinking, and be open to that feedback. So,
well,
that's a pretty good final question. Well done.
Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak with us today.
My pleasure.
It's always a pleasure, and I hope that we get to circle back, after this semester, and we'll see how it went, and maybe we'll have the new normal already.
I hope we get to circle back even before then. I think we're going to do some interesting stuff that you'll want to talk about. So we'll see you very soon.
Thanks again for tuning into today's episode of the eLearning Podcast. If you like what you've learned today in this episode, I encourage you to either follow us or subscribe to us on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. And please do share this episode with one or two of your colleagues or friends. Also, I just want to remind you that you can level up your online learning game with all of the information that's available at the eLearning Success Summit. You can get your free ticket at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And finally, You can also stay up to date on everything that's important, all the news and the resources for e-learning professionals at lmspulse.com. Get our free newsletter by just going to lmspulse.com today. Thanks again.